Okay, we are recording.
All right. This presentation represents the second of a series focusing on the long sequence of Northern Tewa tradition decorated pottery types defined for areas of the Northern Rio Grande. From the beginning of pottery production by groups, ancestral Tewa Pueblo groups to the Spanish colonial period. When I tried to cover this whole pre-colonial time span during my last presentation, about halfway through, I was reminded by Shelby that I had only 15 minutes left. Thus, I may be initially repeating some of the things from my last talk, so bear with me. I will discuss here trends noted for whitewares produced by Northern Rio Grande potters ancestral to contemporary Northern Tewa groups that include Santa Fe Black and White, beginning during the 13th century, to Biscuit wares into the late 16th century. Trends noted for these types provide insights about the nature and origin, as well as connections, changing technological and decorated conventions associated with this long and unique sequence of decorated pottery. As discussed in my last presentation, the continuation of a black and white pottery tradition that first developed in the Colorado Plateau in an extremely different geological setting than the Rio Grande Rift posed distinct challenges. The two maps shown here at different scales and emphasis illustrate the very different settings and geology associated with geographic provinces dominating different areas of our state. Characteristics of clays associated with the fine shell formations originally formed in deep ocean basins, commonly exposed in Mesozoic and other era marine formations, contrast with more recent Cenozoic volcanic and erosional exposures and activities along the Rio Grande Rift. These differences, along with those in soils, topography, history between groups, agricultural potential during different periods, noticeably influenced the characteristic of pottery associated with different regional traditions. As the distinct characteristics of pottery, including whitewares produced by ancestral Tewa Pueblo groups, reflect forms and conventions suited to the distinct temper and clay resources along the Rio Grande Rift. Shown here is an exposure near San Juan Pueblo area showing brownish alluvial clays with granitic sand and mica inclusions commonly used in the production of gray utility wares, and a gray solid chunks of volcanic ash and tuff deposits that have weathered into clays that may have been the source of paste and slips in the production of various Rio Grande whitewares discussed here. This discussion begins after the shift to decorations in organic paint. As noted during my last brown bag presentation, the earliest forms of Santa Fe Black and White appear to have developed out of and closely resembled earlier produced mineral painted pottery forms classified as Quahi Black and White and closely related to types produced in the Chaco region during the Pueblo II period. Such pottery was first described as the blue-gray type during investigations in the early 20th century by Abiquiu at Pueblo, and subsequently defined as Santa Fe Black and White, and refers to the overwhelmingly dominant decorated pottery at sites in the Northern Rio Grande, occupied from AD 1200 to 1300. As the original name implies, clay's pastes tend to be fine in texture and gray to blue. Exteriors are usually unpolished, while exteriors are polished and covered with a thin white slip. The vessel on the right shows the blue-gray paste protruding through the thin white slip. Temper consists of very fine and numerous inclusions, and many include fine sand, silt, or volcanic ash temper. And overall characteristics of Santa Fe Black and White reflect pottery recipes geared to the challenges of the distinct dark qualities from volcanic or alluvial deposits widely exposed in formations along the Rio Grande Rift. Santa Fe Black and White is overwhelmingly dominated by bowls decorated in organic paint on the interior surface only. The designs are organized in a band that is sometimes framed by a single line that begins just below the rim. Designs are created through a variety of motifs, often organized in a series of repeating segments that encircle the band. Although some designs cover the entire surface, much of the spaces are filled, creating opposing negative or isometric designs, as those discussed during my last talk, similar to those noted in contemporaneous pottery produced in other Pueblo regions, including the Colorado Plateau. Similarities in designs executed in organic paint between the local Santa Fe Black and White and Mesa Verde Black and White from the northern San Juan region, which was abandoned in the late 13th century, have been sometimes cited as evidence of long-distance mass migrations from the northern San Juan to the northern Rio Grande regions, indicating the ultimate origin of modern Tewa groups. While the range of styles between these types does overlap, there are significant differences in trends in pace, surface treatments, as well as the usual absence of thick rim, multi-size frame lines, and exterior decorations in Santa Fe Black and White, as compared to many contemporaneous examples of Mesa Verde Black and White. Another trait distinguishing pottery long produced in areas of the northern Rio Grande during the late coalition to today, from that in Pueblo villages to the west, is reflected by the gray utility ware jars that dominate most assemblages. These gray wares are often distinguished from those in surrounding regions by the presence of smeared exterior surfaces that reflect a distinct technique based on inside coiling, not usually evident but assumed to be used in the construction of plain surface decorated wares as well. The inside technique is identified by upward rather than downward pointing overlapping coils and common occurrence of smearing. These coils differ from the exterior corrugated surfaces indicative of the outside coil technique in pottery long produced in regions of the Colorado Plateau. Such east-west differences in pottery construction continue to distinguish Pueblo pottery even today and reflect variation in pottery recipes associated with different groups. And together, the other distinct pottery traits noted in this sequence may reflect a distinct northern Tewa whiteware tradition as well as identity. Certainly, some relationship between groups in these regions is indicated by the dramatic increase in populations residing in increasingly large and formalized organized villages at a time when Pueblo regions to the west were being abandoned. An example of a village occupied during this time in this area is Pindi Pueblo, near Agua Fria, representing one of several villages along the Santa Fe River. The combination of characteristics noted in ceramics and architecture in coalition-based villages seems to me to reflect a continual occupation by Tewa groups who long occupied this area, along with new migrants who may have been continually assimilated into and influenced the material culture of these Tewa villages. Uh, while Santa Fe Black and White can be easily distinguished from contemporaneous types over a very wide area. Pottery assigned to this type from sites across this area dating to AD 1200 to 1300 are extremely similar. For example, similar ranges of forms assigned to Santa Fe Black and White cover an area that covers an area at least that reflected by the modern towns of Las Vegas to the east, Zia to the west, Taos to the north, and Albuquerque to the south, if not a bit more. A wide distribution of Santa Fe Black and White indicates similar long-held and largely locally developed northern Tewa Pueblo tradition pottery recipes, connected by open, widely spread economic and social networks. These trends have been interpreted as reflecting the integration of early coalition-based communities at a regional scale that would have provided for the advantageous sharing of information and food during times of local shortages between rapid growing populations scattered over unpredictable and diverse landscapes. A high degree of stylistic similarity of Santa Fe Black and White from sites distributed across the northern Rio Grande may at first seem to contrast with evidence of compositional differences in the temper noted in examples of this type for sites in different localities that indicate that most vessels were made locally in their general area of recovery. Important clues about the nature of the widespread production of Santa Fe Black and White using a technology designed for clay resources and geography in areas of the northern Rio Grande Rift are provided by data from small oval-shaped features in the Las Cabañas area excavated by Steve Post for OAS, located along the Piedmont areas between the Pottery Plateau and the Santa Fe River. A small number of sherds assigned to Santa Fe Black and White from these features were vitrified or spawed through repeating firings and along with stratigraphic files similar to other features identified elsewhere and thought to have been also used to fire organic painted whitewares indicate their use as specialized kilns for fine whiteware kilns. They are located several miles away from the nearest contemporaneous villages, reflecting the location of these kilns, away from occupied areas in suitable topographic settings, allowing for effective and safe firings near wood fuel resources at a time when they would have been completely depleted in areas closer to occupied villages, and thus may reflect widespread conventions allowing for the mass production of similar pottery even during times of growth and stress. Pottery produced in different areas of the northern Rio Grande during the first half of the 14th century in areas of the northern Rio Grande exhibit increasingly distinct pace and surface characteristics. This resulted in the recognition of several different pottery types or varieties of Santa Fe in different areas of the northern Rio Grande during the end of the coalition period. This increased differentiation may be associated with emerging village clusters that may represent the appearance of kinship-based network alliances that provide for the buffering and sharing of information and resources. Here in the Santa Fe area, this is represented by a very localized variety of Santa Fe black and white, sometimes characterized as Pindi black and white, distinguished from other varieties by the presence of very dark gray to brown paste with the painted surface covered with a thin, streaky white slip and temper consisting of large, soft white to light gray pumice fragments. The other late variety, and the only other one to be discussed here is Santa Fe black and white, is Wiyo Black-on-white, originally described by Kidder as the biscuitoid type. While black and white was Wiyo Black-on-white was transitional between Santa Fe black and white and biscuit ware types. It was produced in the Tewa Basin, Pottery Plateau, and Chama Valley, and is distinguished from early Santa Fe black and white by soft paste that range from light tan, brown to greenish gray, and tempered with extremely fine crushed, angular, tough silt fragments. Decorations consist of dense, dark, bold layouts as compared to Santa Fe black and white, while still exhibiting similar layouts and designs. Forms are usually represented by bowls decorated on the interior surface only, with very well polished, often greasy in appearance, over smooth surfaces. Slips are rare and when present indiscreet. The next development in the pottery sequence discussed here involved the production of distinct biscuitware forms during the Classic period, beginning sometime during the middle 14th century. By this time, many of the regions in the West, long occupied by Pueblo groups, where Santa Fe black and white, where black and white pottery had been abandoned, with much of the area that was now occupied in the Pueblo world focused on regions along the valleys of the Rio Grande. Trends over wide areas of this region include the replacement of white wares by glazed wares in many of the southernmost areas and the protection of Jemez black and white in the Jemez highlands. It also included a new and distinct decorated pottery form produced by Tewa potters, sometimes described as biscuit wares, in areas of the Northern Rio Grande region. This type developed directly out of Wiyo Black-on-white with a similar area of production that included many very large ancestral Tewa Classic period villages or towns spread across the Pajarito Plateau, Tewa Basin, and Chama Valley, including here Odawi Pueblo in the Pajarito Plateau. It is also interesting to note that by the beginning of the Classic period, in places such as Pecos Pueblo and villages in the Santa Fe area, including the Agua Fria Schoolhouse and the site under Santa Fe, um, which were among the places where Kidder first noted in the fine biscuit and glazed wares, painted wares altogether were no longer produced locally, but instead the associated pottery is represented by a roughly equal mixture of glazed wares from the south and biscuit wares to the north and west. This important discovery first resulted from Anna Shepard's pioneering studies of temper and clay resources at Pecos Pueblo and still provides important insights concerning the nature and connections and overall systems, along with new strategies to cope with declining fuel resources associated with the areas where these two distinct ceramic wares were used. While still included here in the sequence of Tewa White wares, biscuit wares reflect a major technological shift based on the use of soft porous clays that mature in low fine temperatures. Surfaces reflect the shift toward gray, cream, brown to tan surface colors that represent a larger trend across the Rio Grande, away from the earlier black on white effect, so that biscuit wares have sometimes been described in terms of black on gray types. Pastes of biscuit ware types reflect the use of bentonitic clays from ash formations with extremely fine vitric tough inclusions as the sole temper. Painted decorations executed in a black organic paint have a more open, spacious, or less filled-in appearance than earlier types. The earliest biscuit ware bowls forms have been described as biscuit A or Abiquiu, black on gray or white. This type is distinguished from later bowl forms with similar paste, temper, and surface colors based on the presence of slip and polish painted decorations in organic paint on the interior surface only. Some of the decorative effects still consist of geometric forms, while others combine to create stylized forms, including butterflies, birds, and other stylized representations. And they're black on gray or white, or biscuit B, is distinguished from earlier Abiquiu by the presence of slipped surfaces with painted decorations on both the exterior and interior of bowls, with progressive heightening and curvature of rims through the classic period. Some designs may resemble earlier geometric styles with more open, unpainted areas, with less emphasis on negative designs between decorative motifs, along with a trend toward designs displaying a range of figures or representative symbols. Among the most notable representative designs is a common motif, sometimes described as an awanyu, and long assumed to represent feathered serpents derived from Mesoamerica. An alternative interpretation proposed by David Snow is they may represent stylized grizzly bear paws based on an examination of examples of this motif in pottery and rock art. He argues this symbol represents grizzly bear paws adopted from northern plain groups and may reflect symbols associated with either witchcraft or warfare. The appearance of this new and distinct motif may reflect symbols of Tewa identity, expression, and fear at a time of dramatic change when Tewa groups in the northern Pueblo world became increasingly surrounded by other groups, including Pueblo groups with other traditions, as well as Athabascan, Utahs, Tecum, and Plains woodland groups that begin to fill in surrounding areas previously unoccupied or abandoned by Pueblo groups. Increasing pressures from these areas may also account for the associated symbolism and of the reputation of the Northern Tewa as formidable warriors at the time of the arrival of the Spanish. Along with the development of distinct Tewa pottery technology and styles associated with the biscuit wares, there is also appears to have been a revival of some traits noted in earlier ancestral Pueblo pottery forms from areas to the west. These include ticked rims with thick and thin framing lines just below the rims, along with interior and exterior designs on bowls. These characteristics have sometimes been interpreted as reflecting the before discussed mass migration of the abandoned Colorado Plateau, including the Mesa Verde region. Given the nature and timing of these traits. I think these may reflect traits carried by small groups from these regions that joined the Tewa as their homeland was abandoned. Likewise, some of the simple isolated pendant designs noted in the biscuit wares may reflect Guyana influences resulting from movements of small groups who once occupied highland areas to the west. Thus, the many characteristics of biscuit wares may reflect the way of making, finishing, and firing decorated pottery that by this time was distinct to Tewa identity, but also exhibited echoes of earlier pottery styles carried and sometimes revived by the small numbers of migrants from abandoned areas to the west and villages that, at least for a period, may have been reflected by several ethnic groups residing in the same villages. Trends noted for the pottery discussed here then appear to indicate a sequence by ancestral northern Tewa Pueblo groups, shown here in the red, whose current area occupation, while while historic while historically connected with populations from other Pueblo regions, may also reflect distinct technologies and identity that may span back to the beginning of the production of pottery in this region, if not earlier. My next brown bag presentation will discuss subsequent trends and influences that were reflected by the production of new pottery by Tewa Pueblo potters during the Spanish colonial and American periods that include black on cream, polychrome, and polished plain wares, tradition pottery types. I might also have a little brief hiatus next time, where I'm going to move a little bit away from the Rio Grande area and discuss some stuff in the La Plata Valley in the northern San Juan. Any questions? Yes.
Anyway, so I have a question on your earlier specimens, like 1200 to 1300. There was a distinctive checkerboard pattern. Is that and I was wondering if that was there, right from back, yeah, right here.
Okay.
But there were 2 or 3 specimens like that that you had pictures of. I was wondering, what is that is there a interpretation of that pattern?
I've heard sometimes them described as gardens.
Okay.
Um, um, this is an interesting style because this is a style. This is one of the styles that goes back into the earlier time period. So in the Colorado Plateau, you'll see this style in pottery classified in the Mesa Verde or San Juan region as Mancos, and then Macamo Black-on-white, and then in the Chaco area as Escavada, and that so that's one of my basically, if you had exactly that same vessel, but it was in mineral paint, you would call that Kwahi black and white. And if you had that same vessel in or also in organic paint, but crushed igneous rock temper, you would call that Macamo black and white. And if you had it in mineral paint and sand temper, you would call it Escavada black and white from the Chaco area. So you see both regional influences and a continuity.
So the pattern is basically the same, but the mineral organic paint is different in the different.
Yes.
Thanks.
Do you think we're doing this hybrid for the folks that that are online, can you repeat the questions since they won't be able to hear them?
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay.
Dean,
Yes.
as long as you're flipping back, could you get back to the pottery, the piece that looked as if it was very intense cross-cut, cross-lining, like almost as if it was weaving?
Oh yeah, another one. That was way back at the beginning, wasn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, one of the first ones.
That one.
Okay. This is a this is the same thing. Um, if you were to, it has very this is from a site that OAS did right on the I think near the Lamy area, and it was probably the earliest Santa Fe black and white, the earliest site right at the beginning of Santa Fe, and this is another example that is basically organic painted um, mineral paint, but that's also a design that design that you see with the weave designs that um, that's a variation of a hatchet. It's a cross hatchet design, and it's a variation of a hatchet design. Again, you see everywhere in the Pueblo world. You know, from 1,000 to 1,200, and in Chaco with mineral that would be Gallup black and white. In Mesa Verde, it would be um, a, a transitional Mancos Macamo black and white, and one of the reasons, um, and so um, and what um, there's again been a lot of speculation of what hatchered and cross hatching, and like Rob suggested, it could reflect um, weaving. And another explanation I've seen is that it affects sort of irrigation canals. Um, um, but whatever it is again, it's really interesting, and why I I wanted to start with this. It shows that the transition to Santa Fe black and white basically reflects these earlier types both elsewhere in the Northern Rio Grande and across the Pueblo world, and um, with the shift, and what makes them Santa Fe is a shift in paste and paint. Yes.
That seems incredibly labor intensive. That design.
Nicely done.
Nice.
I hadn't really thought about it.
It looks like weaving into
See, that's funny that it strikes you as labor intensive. I kind of thought it was sort of sloppy.
well, I can't imagine painting it. So.
Yeah, but yeah, but yes.
At the end of your slides, Dean, you had 3 examples of pottery that have Canadian influence. Were those all found at one single site, or were those different?
And again, do you
I think-
repeat the question for the online folks?
Okay.
The very last slide.
So the Scott had the question. Question is where when we look at these vessels sort of with the Guyana um, um, influence, is where do they come from? I can't remember exactly. If I remember right, most of them came from the northernmost area of the ancestral northern Tewa, which is the Chama Valley, and that's kind of an important thing to consider because the Chama River flows from the Guyana highlands down into the Chama Valley, which is sort of a valley in the Rio Grande River. And so it would kind of make sense that this stuff would come from the Chama Valley. And so so that would be an interesting thing to think about is how different waterways or different paths or different valleys may have been corridors for these different earlier pottery types. So the Chama Valley being a corridor for this sort of influence, and where where other and how that would contrast, that would be more influences in the Mesa Verde. So what I was kind of pointing out is during the Pueblo III period and the Guyana highlands, you have this among ancestral Pueblo groups, you have this type called this the Guyana Black-on-white, which is often isolated in simple designs, and they're often considered as sort of the outcasts. They weren't, but 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 it's sort of this distinct tradition adapted to the highlands of the Guyana mountains. At the same time, you had the better known, like Mesa Verde Black-on-white, associated with broad areas of the Colorado Plateau, which include the northern San Juan, Mesa Verde, and the north part of the Chaco area from 12 to 1300. So that you have these two different styles that may have moved in. It is interesting, and I would think that the Chama Valley would be the connecting area between um, um, the Guyana and the Chama Valley, since the Guyana area is on the headwaters of the Chama.
Well, they're on one of the, tell me, it is though. Where did these examples come from?
Um, all over. I mean,
Okay.
I if I remember, a lot of these came came from the Chama Valley.
From
Some
Guyana? Or from
no,
closer to
no.
Abiquiu, Zapatway?
Yeah, like sites like Abiquiu
Okay.
and Sapawi, which are both in the Chama Valley.
Okay, I'm just curious, thank you.
What would be the explanation for the transition in Santa Fe and Wiyo to Biscuits, which is a lot thicker but lighter weight?
Well, being a ceramic, an unrepentant cultural ecologist, I would say it's resources that there. Again, I briefly discussed sort of the Rio Grande River. What you have to realize that the place that we're in the Rio Grande Valley is sort of like no other place in the state where I think this is the second biggest non-tectonic rift in the world, where the mountains are being pulled apart. And what that does is that creates this huge corridors that where the Rio Grande River follows. And then you have these big basin areas like the Espanola Basin, the Santa Fe Basin, and the Albuquerque Basin. And then that gets filled in with alluvial deposits. And on top of that, that stress creates all this volcanic episodes. And so So what happens is in contrast with most areas occupied by Pueblo people, particularly in the San Juan Basin, you get a very, very different geology. And it's a mixture of this brown stuff which is the alluvial deposits coming weathering off the mountains, filling in these basins created by the Rio Grande Rift. And then that gray is these volcanic activity. And you may not think about it, but we're in a highly volcanic area right now, where where you have volcanoes all the time. And when I say all the time, geologically, I mean every 10,000 years or so. Yes.
So for those that are interested, oh, we're echoing.
For those that are interested, our first talk this year was the geology of the Santa Fe area, and that is available on the Facebook page already.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, so I'll work with Scott to try to get better quality because the images were really nice, but the quality online was not. So we'll try to get that available, but it talks about how New Mexico, before being called the land of enchantment, was the land of volcanoes.
Yeah, I mean, and a huge example as you go upslope, like into the Pottery Plateau. I mean, that's all volcanic deposits, and so you have tough and so back to the question about what does that have to do with the biscuit wares, is like on the Pottery Plateau, those big tough deposits are completely different than the kaolinite clays that you find in the San Juan Basin that derive from marine shales from ancient marine formations, and instead they're betonitic clays. And so partly what you're seeing from Santa Fe to Wiyo to Biscuit wares is just developing a technology that is really suited to these bentonite clays. On top of that, you probably saw a little theme in talking about the kilns and then talking about places where they're starting to get their pottery from other places that years and years of occupation create, wood resources just get decimated, and where do you have pottery? Well, one of the things about the biscuit wares is it's a recipe in the clay that you can get away with firing the pottery at an unusually low temperature. So you're not going to use as much wood or fuel.
Well, I still want to press the question
What?
that K. Paul just asked. The people making the Santa Fe and Wiyo Black-on-white, we're still in the middle of the Rio Grande Rift. So
were the biscuit wares.
wares, right?
Uh-huh.
So again, what is the compositional or technological change going from Wiyo to biscuit ware?
From sort of an ash from an ash clay that's going to look like that top ash level to something like that you're going to get in the Chama Valley or Pottery Plateau, where it's going to be a little bit browner clay, and it's a bentonite clay. If you want to see good examples of that sort of clay, go up to the hot springs, by Ojo Caliente, and you'll see just this super soft clays, and so it's just a variation of the volcanic clays, and so you're just getting a slight shift to the variation of clays that are going to be derived from volcanic deposits.
To follow up just a little on that, It seems to me a single artist, if I can call him that, could get clay from one source one week and go in the fall and get a different source, and it would be listed as a different type, right? Even though it's one.
It would. And the fact that the typology works pretty darn good for time shows that there are these pretty consistent recipes during different time periods. Oh yeah, it would have been simple. I mean, it wouldn't have been a big stress to do something completely different, and it would completely have messed us up, you know. And there, you know, and there are times and places where things get confusing, and but that the typology works is you basically see this evolution of technology recipes and clay resources that seem to happen through time.
Did I misunderstand you that the biscuit ware requires less available resources to?
It's softer. It's softer and lower fiber. Yeah.
So would the depletion of resources encourage biscuit ware making?
I would think so. It's a guess, but
Right.
Yeah.
Or the movement of people.
Yeah. I mean,
You seem to be able to tell by looking whether a paint is mineral or organic.
yeah.
How do you do that? I look at them and they look identical to me.
I would say not 100% of the time, you know, maybe 90-something% of the time.
Bad.
Okay. He's asking what's the difference between mineral and organic paint, and so there's this huge shift from mineral to organic paint across much of the Pueblo world. And my last talk, I talked about mostly the sequence for the mineral painted stuff, and this one was the organic. And the way to tell is that organic paint is 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 in the surface, and so you have organic material that permeates. Um, the the mineral paint is on the surface. One of the tricks that I use is I watch for irregularities on the surface, and if I can see them through the paint, then that's organic. If the paint can completely obscures, and sometimes too, if it's if you look at it or through a microscope or closely, and you have a two-dimensional surface, then that would be mineral rather than organic. And so,
For those in the building, we can grab a couple of examples after this and show you that where you can touch it.
So and the mineral starts off as iron, and again, to make the iron black also requires certain prowess in firing that you're not oxidizing the surface. And the organic pigment is also a challenge, because if you don't get exactly the right atmosphere, the organic is just carbon and it'll just fire out in the air. And so and so sometimes you'll just see like a little cloud where you can just barely see where the organic. So both of the to do both of the pigments requires somewhat quite a bit of skill, but different types of skill and control.
So the mineral paint is more, I mean, the organic paint is more suited for the biscuit ware and the low firing temperatures.
And so there, and there's probably a bituminity. Probably part of the secret is some of these bituminous clays, and that may also be part of the shift biscuit wares that they found clays that were really organic paint retentive. Another variation of that same effect that you get in organic is when you get smudge surfaces, like which was common in the Magian, and then historically out here with the Capo and Tewa black wares, and that's also carbon, but what you're doing there is in the last stages, you're creating a smoke, and you're taking the carbon from the air and then permeating it into the paint, into the surface as a slip rather than the paint. Any other questions? I hope everything I told you isn't wrong.
I can't-